a second, but on transport specifically, what do we need to be doing better?
Better railways, more investment in railways. There's still more railway lines that we could be doing in Scotland, upgrading them. But buses are absolutely critical for most people's day-to-day journeys, but also making access to low-emission cars much more affordable. They're really expensive at the moment. So I would have continued with the target down south to get rid of new cars, make new cars energy efficient. And business needs that certainty, needs to invest. We need to bring down the prices for people, but it's all of those things. And active travel, walking and cycling where it works.
Right.
There's a lot of infrastructure.
That's a good point to ask. We're in Aberdeen city centre tonight. Put your hands up if you came here by public transport this evening. Wow. Maybe 10 people out of an audience of 70 people. The rest of you, hands up if you came here by private car here this evening. OK, there's your problem, Gillian Martin. What's going on?
Because I bet you a lot of those people were from Aberdeenshire, am I right? Yeah. So, and I agree with pretty much everything that Sarah Boyka says, apart from one thing, and obviously Sarah's from a different part of Scotland, she's from Lothians, and I'm from a very rural part of Aberdeenshire. And I think this is why the issue about cars is important, and you can't demonise cars, because if you live in a rural area, you might not have that access to a train station. You might not have that access, not so much to a bus service, but the bus service might not work for you. So, for example, I live out in Aberdeenshire, and the bus services are radial. They go into the city centre all the time. So if you are in Ellon, but you work in, I don't know, you work in Bankery, you would have to go from Ellon into Aberdeen City, get a bus and go out to Bankery. So basically, that rules out you actually working there, because that you would spend your whole time on a bus, for example, and they're quite expensive as well. You would have to have a car. So you're ruling out employment options as well. So I think it's really important that we look at a mix of solutions here.
So Rishi Sunak was quite right when he spoke up and said we need to stop demonising car drivers.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe I've fallen
That's what he said.
But I have to say that if he had said that, and then he had said, as Sarah said, he hadn't rolled back on the sort of the promise that he was going to make it more difficult. I think he was going to ban the sale of petrol and diesel cars by a certain point. And that's going to incentivise the market for electric cars. But of course, with electric cars, we have to have more of the infrastructure, the charging infrastructure as well. I think one of the things, I'm lucky enough to have an electric car, and I'm lucky enough to have a parking space, so I actually was able to get a home charging point. What about people that are maybe in flats? They need to look at maybe having charging points.
We're supposed to have 30,000 by 2030. We've got less than 5,000.
But you know what I would argue as well, and this is not going to make me very popular with people that live in some of our big cities of Scotland. People in big cities in Scotland do not need a car. If you live in Edinburgh City, you've probably got one of the best bus services in the whole of the UK. You do not really need a car, particularly because you can get the home delivery for supermarket shopping, whatever.
So they should be giving up their car.
If you live out in Strichen, you need a car. And if you don't have a car, we're talking about a just transition here. If we do the wrong thing in this area, we'll penalise people in rural areas and make it very difficult. And we've already got a drain of people coming from rural areas, particularly young people. If you don't have that infrastructure there, then you're going to lose people to the big cities.
Hold that thought, Gillian. Man in the front row.
I welcome everything that's just been said. I completely agree with 99% of it, except for the not demonising cars. Study after study has shown, and if you look at cities like Copenhagen, anywhere in the Netherlands, etc., where active transport has grown, you need to make car use inconvenient in order to have an alternative. So while there is a place for cars, Scotland is a rural country to a large extent. We do need a modal shift, and for that, we need to make cars more inconvenient.
OK, no, hang on a second. Paul's going to tell us about the Netherlands in just a second. But gentleman in the white shirt there. Yes, on you go.
Yeah, so the lack of train services in Aberdeenshire is testament to the fact how, on a UK level, Scotland is a second-class citizen. Because had we been in the south of England, there'd be a train network. I go every month. Every month I do a clinic in Banff, and I pass by Udney Station. There's a station hotel in Cullen. And I lament the fact that we are deprived of that resource that is taken for granted in the south. And that's another reason why I support independence for Scotland.
Thank you. Gentleman in the front row here. Yes.
I live in Peterhead, or perhaps I ought to say I bide in the Blue Toon. And to my certain knowledge, there are now in the town of Peterhead 3 charging points for electric vehicles. Can I ask if measures are in place to incentivize people to provide more charging points?
OK, we'll pick up on that. But Paul, just on that gentleman there's first point, the Dutch experience of this is interesting. Way ahead when it comes to electric vehicles, way ahead when it comes to charging points as well. What are we missing here?
Yeah, I mean, different country, different issues, right? I mean, Netherlands is far more compact, easier infrastructure, but a big learning, right? Because people actually do like to cycle, they do like to use public transport, and again, we can learn from that. And Aberdeen is a great example. We've got 24 electric buses here, we've got 15 hydrogen buses here. You know, actually, we can make this happen. But we are addicted to our cars. 5.5 million people in Scotland, 3 million vehicles in Scotland. It's quite incredible where we are and not very electrified. So actually, if we want to make a change, it is not just about the transport change and all the things that Gillian talked about earlier around how we do travel. We also have to make a lifestyle change, how we actually want to move around. Because at the moment, it's not working here and we can't decarbonize unless we sort it out.
Seppi, how do we make that happen? I mean, we've got ultra-low emission zones coming here and other cities. How do we push that faster? Well,
I mean, first of all, I'd say I think we're ignoring the fact that some of the lowest income households don't own cars, actually. So we need to remember that. So they rely on public transport. And I'm not sure that public transport in Scotland is really up to scratch at all in terms of the bus services, the rail services. That's what people are relying on to get into towns. Secondly, you know, we are going, you know, the phase out of selling of petrol and diesel cars was from 2035, has now been moved to 2030, but doesn't really actually make that much difference because there's still a zero emissions vehicle mandate on the car manufacturers. They're still starting to see a big uptick in the sale of electric vehicles, and the second-hand electric vehicle market is going to be booming in the next 2 or 3 years as electric vehicles start passing into that market. I mean, most people in the country actually buy their cars second-hand anyway, so the costs will come down in that respect.
But if we don't have the charging points, I mean, we're so far behind in terms of the targets for charging.
Yeah, I mean, we are 70% of households can actually use residential charging. That's the figure across the UK, but that doesn't address the people that can't. And I think that's the problem with a lot of the stuff is that you have to make the choices now. You have to put the policies in place now to make sure that everybody can access it. And that's about policy choices. That's not about technology choices. So I think let's be clear on that. We can move to lower emissions in transport. We can do it. We just need to make the right policy decisions now.
And make sure the trains run as well. Gentleman with the beard there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all well and good talking about car use and bus use. There's a lot of talk about, you know, the 20-minute neighbourhood or the 15-minute neighbourhood, where councils across the country are closing facilities. In Aberdeen, libraries have been closed by the council. Swimming pools have been closed, and you have to get the bus into town. And if you've got mobility issues, where you can only fit one wheelchair on a bus at a time, it does make it very difficult. And then, you know, you've got the whole aspect of when you are out and about, walking in town, walking from one place to the other. If you do have mobility issues, it's very difficult. The amount of times I've nearly tipped my partner out of her wheelchair because there's a pothole on the pavement or a curb that's, you know, not very accessible. There needs to be more investment in actually making places easier to walk about.
Thank you. Lady over there. Yes.
Do we need to have a discussion about renationalising our public transport system? Because a lot of the countries you go to in Europe who have very efficient services are nationalised.
Thank you. Liam Kerr, is it time to renationalise transport to get to net zero the way we need to?
I'll speak about trains in 2 seconds. I'd like to take that point.
No, answer that lady's point about renationalisation.
Renationalise. So we've renationalised rail in this country, and despite me and many others campaigning, including Gillian Martin, actually, to be fair, campaigning for North East Rail back up to Peterhead and the Broch, it's not happening. I've campaigned for new stations at Cove and Newton Hill to get the modal shift that we heard about. It's not happening under this Scottish Government. And the nationalised rail operator is about to cut 15% of your trains between Inverurie and Aberdeen. Why? In order to increase access to the Central Belt. So if you want genuine modal shift in the North East, then I'm not sure nationalisation is going to deliver it.
And do you agree when Rishi Sunak talked about us demonising car drivers and accepting that cars have got a big place in our future? Do you agree with that?
I agree, actually, with Gillian Martin that if you're going to live outside Aberdeen in some of the excellent places that surround Aberdeen in the North East, you need to be able to get in. Now, Sarah Boyack talks about moving to electric vehicles, but as you've pointed out, the suggestion is that we need 30,000 charge points by, I think, 2030. We are currently on a track whereby we won't have enough charge points until 2042. And even if they are there, as perhaps the gentleman from Peterhead will testify, half of them don't work anyway, as discovered by the P&J when they tried to take a van from Wick all the way down to the Central Belt. So I'm afraid we've got much bigger issues here in terms of getting the charge points in and making sure they're repaired once they break.
Thank you. Lady in the glasses. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's really not a one-size-fits-all, picking up Gillian's point. We really need an urban strategy and a rural strategy because it's two very different lifestyles and two separate types of communities that we need to give opportunities to. Otherwise, it's not going to work. If we dilute it and do one fits for both, one or the other is going to, it's not going to have the same impact. So you need city centre type strategies. You need those to support the rural communities at the same time as well.
Have we in the audience tonight any electric car owners who would like to share their experience, especially... Oh, yeah, OK, down in the front row. We haven't heard from this gentleman down here, so tell us all about it, sir.
Well, thank you. I live in Aberdeenshire. I'm lucky enough to have an electric car, and again, I've got my own charging point, so I seldom use public chargers. I think it's great. I do save quite a bit on travelling, but one point I was wanting to make earlier, for the outlying settlements within Aberdeenshire, there is other options, and that could be like car clubs. Buses from where I live to Aberdeen's maybe every hour and a half. If we take Gillian's example in Bankery, I do know at least 2 car club cars there, and that's maybe a change of mindset that needs to be... We speak about affordability of cars. Well, it's just like hiring a car for the time you need it, and that's possibly a mindset change that we as the public need to make.